Welkom, een kerstverse nieuwe aflevering van jouw favoriete podcast. En wat voor een, John Strelecky. Deze man heeft meerdere boeken geschreven, waarvan er meer dan 3 miljoen verkocht zijn. Zijn boeken zijn in 40 talen vertaald en worden in 60 landen uitgegeven. Nou, en voor de YouTube-kijker hou ik er nu een paar in de lucht. Bijvoorbeeld The Why Café. Een inspirerende reis naar jezelf. Nou, mijn camera probeert er nu op scherp te stellen. Oké, heel schattig. Ook Return to the Why Café. How to be rich and happy. The Big Five for Life. Nou, ik lig hier bedolven in boeken van John Strelecky, die ik uiteraard ook weg mag gaan geven. En waar gaan we het dan in dit interview over hebben? Nou, John vertelt bijvoorbeeld hoe het is om niemand minder dan Obama in je voorprogramma te hebben. Een van zijn boeken heet dus How to be rich and happy. Dat is dan ook meteen een vraag aan John. How to be rich and happy. En vooral komen in dit interview alle onderwerpen aan bod omtrent geluk en succes, waar ik en waar jij zo ontzettend gepassioneerd over ben. Het is echt een interview waarbij de energie tegen de plinten klotst. Dus ik wil eigenlijk niks verklappen en ik wil dat je gewoon gaat luisteren. En jeetje, wat was dit vet. Dus ik hoop dat de John en ik elkaar vaker gaan ontmoeten voor misschien nog een interview. Eén dingetje dan nog voordat ik hem aan het woord ga laten. Check alvast thijslindhout.nl/why, dus het Engelse why, W-H-Y. Want daar kan je een van de gratis boeken winnen waar ik nu onder bedolven lig. En krijg je sowieso gewoon direct in jouw inbox een pdf van John met 10 tips voor meer geluk in je leven. Dus helemaal gratis en voor niets. Check die pdf op thijslindhout.nl/why en misschien weer dan een van die boeken. Heel erg bedankt, John. En ga ervan genieten. Hier is John Strelecky.
100% face!
Game on.
Game on, yeah. Let's put our game face on.
Right. All right, now we got to get serious.
Yeah, let's inspire people.
That's right. Stop everything else.
Yeah, cool. Bucks, that's like my start ritual. Awesome.
Yeah, man. Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a great honor. We're here in the beautiful Amersfoort in the middle of the Netherlands.
Exactly.
You're in the middle of your European tour.
I am in the middle of the European tour, yep. Yeah.
And you're from Florida originally.
I am.
You still live there?
I do, yeah.
Oh,
I
awesome.
love warm weather and being outside, and the Florida is perfect for that.
I just spent 3 weeks in Florida, like 2 months ago.
See, we should have done. If I'd have known that, we could have hung out there together.
Yeah, totally right. But it was like crazy hot in that period. It was like end of July.
Yeah. Where were you? What part?
In Miami for 1 week. Then I went to Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
That not so much. And then we went to maybe you're from there, and I just
soft, subtle way of being like, yeah, it was okay. Yeah.
yeah. And then we went to the west coast of Florida. So like, where were we?
Like Fort Myers, Sarasota.
Yeah, Sarasota.
Yeah, that's beautiful over there.
Yeah. So where are you from in Florida?
So I live just outside of the Orlando area, so I'm right in the middle of the state.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're like in the theme park capital of the world.
We literally can see fireworks from Disney World from our backyard.
Wow.
Yeah, which sounds great, but when my daughter was brand new to the world and a newborn baby, and you just put her down to sleep, and then at 10 o'clock at night you hear boom, 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 and you know this is going to go on for 20 more minutes. You're like, oh, seriously.
And is that every night?
It is every night. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And during the summertime, I think it's at midnight. So it's, yeah.
Wow. I know a friend of mine, he's like the biggest Disney fan in the world. When he hears this,
he
he's
should
like...
be living there, right?
Yeah.
He's like, wait, I want to go back. I want to go
Yeah.
sit in that guy's backyard. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And let's just start with the one question I always prepare.
All
and
right.
I hope I translate it correctly to English. But it's, John, what would you like to become? What would you like to be or do when you grow up?
Yeah, who do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
I actually am living the life that I could never have even dreamed in terms of when I would grow up. So I love what I do. I get to travel the world and meet very interesting people like you and have cool conversations about things that matter to me, which is so fantastic. I get to write books and I get to interact with fans who read the books and tell me great stories about the way in which their life was impacted in a positive way because of the books. I love to travel, so I get to incorporate all of this together. Here I am in the Netherlands with you. I'm going to go to other places in Europe after this. I have my family actually with me. We just got back from 10 days in Greece as part of this media tour. And so right now I am living a life that I never could have imagined when I was a kid.
Yeah. And I guess life happened and that brought you in your job as like an author, because I don't think you had like a big dream as a young kid. I want to become a worldwide known author of success inspiration books.
No, I mean, it depends how far back you track my story. When I was younger, I never could have thought I really could be anything. I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. I didn't think that my place in the world was going to be too relevant in any way, shape, or form. And then when I finally figured out something I thought I wanted to do, which was to be a pilot, then I was on that track and dedicated everything towards that track. I started working when I was 12 years old. I was doing physical manual labor jobs, worked super hard, got into university, and then this dream of becoming a pilot ended up being taken away from me because I had a heart condition that nobody had ever diagnosed. So yeah, I went from thinking I was not going to be very relevant in life to, wait, I actually see a place where I could be relevant, wait, that's not going to happen. And I think this is one of the big takeaways, and you and I were talking offline, that sometimes you move in a direction that you think is your direction, only to discover, either because of your own self-awareness or because something else tells you this actually isn't your path. And at the time, it can be catastrophic. It was certainly catastrophic for me. But what's interesting is very often when you look backwards, and I'd love to hear your take on this as it relates to your story, it's when you look backwards, you realize, wow, like if it hadn't happened that way, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I actually really like where I am now.
Yeah, if you imagine you would right now be a pilot.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you how clueless I was as a young person. So clueless. Like
clueless.
No understanding.
Okay.
Yeah. So why would someone want to be a pilot? Well, I knew two things about piloting. One is I had seen the movie Top Gun back in the day with Tom Cruise, and I was like, all right, that looks really cool, right? Because I love the idea of pushing yourself to be the best of the best, even though inside I didn't really have the self-confidence. I thought for some reason that would sort of catapult me in that direction.
Yeah.
So that was one. So here's a little takeaway for everyone listening or watching. Do your best to not choose your life path based on a movie. Because it's fictional.
Do not dream of being the next Tom Cruise or Beyonce.
Well, I think you can have that dream. That's fine. But like the movies are a fictional representation of, like, that's not real. And to your point, this is probably where you're going with that if your vision of what Beyonce's life is really like is based on Instagram, maybe rethink the model, right? Because that is not the truth. That is a perceived, we'll throw this out to the world, here's how their life sort of works.
And by the way, I think she's one of the hardest working people in show business.
Yeah, you just raised such a great point, and I'm totally off tangent, but it's an important point in that...
We will pick up the story.
We'll eventually get there, so I think very often one of the mistakes that we can make in life is looking at someone like Beyonce or looking at someone like Tom Cruise's story and saying, that's what I want, and assuming that it's all super easy. The truth that I have learned as an author is that, when you're in a state of flow, and I wrote the first cafe book in 21 days, and I wrote Life Safari, the book we were just talking about offline, in 10 days. So when I get in a state of unbelievable flow, it's very effortless for me. But then when that flow is done, the very next step for me is editing. And editing that's when you like put on the heavy duty backpack, the heavy duty gear, and you just grind it out.
Yeah.
And I will go through a book 50 times until I'm happy with every single word, every single sentence, every single paragraph. That is not glamorous. It is not joyful. Right?
Yeah.
But but it's necessary for me to get to the end goal, which the end goal is a book that I really feel is the best I can offer the world to make a positive difference in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think this is a tremendous takeaway, that if our vision of Beyonce's life is that, no, she just has this unbelievable moment of inspiration, walks into the studio, cranks it out, it's perfect on the first try, and then goes on tour. Yeah. Right? I'm sorry, but if that's how you think it's going to work, you're going to be radically disappointed at some point following that model. And so I think the takeaway is, when you're doing something that you love, it's going to feel like tremendous flow at times. And that's the way it should feel. That's partly how we know we're in the right space. But keep in mind, in order for it to be fantastic, And I mean, I'm talking like A+, whether this is you're making a movie, you're doing a podcast, you're writing a book, it's going to require you to dig deep, do the tough work. And that's not always going to be super fun, but that's part of the process too.
Yeah. And if you shouldn't make your life plan inspired by a movie, what should you do? Where should you base your life plan on?
So I love the idea of, I have this concept called finding your who's. It's not about how do I do something, it's about who's already done it. And so I will tell you an example of that. When I sat for 21 days and had this sort of stream of conscious typing experience, which became the first book, the first cafe book, I was like, well, it looks like a book. It feels like a book. Maybe I should turn it into a book, right? I didn't know anything about that. And so I went to my bookshelf and I took one of my favorite books of all time off the shelf. It's this little book called Illusions. And I took a ruler out, and I was like, okay, 7¼ inches tall by 4¼ inches wide. That's how my book is going to be, right? And I was like, what are the margins? I don't know, 1/2-inch margins? My book is going to have 1/2-inch margins. Yeah. So I think the idea of using other references as a vehicle to propel ourselves forward is fantastic, right? I think maybe you can shed some light on this. When you were thinking about, I think I'm interested in trying this podcast thing. Like, did you listen to other podcasts? Did you find ones you liked?
Totally. And first of all, the category, iTunes gives you like 25 categories. And there was not a category self-help or inspiration. So I was like, is it education? Is it sports? Is it business? And Timothy Ferriss is in the category business. So I thought, I want to be the Dutch Timothy Ferriss.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll go into the category business.
Yeah.
And these microphones, I was always a fan of Giel Belen, a Dutch famous radio DJ. And in his radio studio, he had these mics, the Shure SM7B. So there you go.
So I love this idea that if you are starting to lock in on a direction you want your life to go. So I call it your big 5 for life, the 5 things that you most want to do, see, or experience. So one of the great techniques is what you just described. Awesome. Who can you imitate at the start that gets you over those initial hurdles and obstacles? Because I don't know about you, but what I find with most people is at the start, they're energetic, they're courageous, they're fired up about whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
And then they hit that first major obstacle, and that bleeds off about 30% of the energy. And then they get past that one, and then they hit the second big obstacle, and that sucks about 40% more of the energy or the time or the money.
Yeah.
And then they hit the third obstacle, and that takes all the rest of it, and then they're done. And that's sad. And if you use this model that you just described that you used, okay, microphones. I don't know anything about microphones. I'll take those because that dude uses them and he's very successful and I like the way it sounds.
Yeah.
We're now over obstacle 1 and we haven't even used up 1% of the energy yet. That is so much more efficient.
Yeah.
And then you can get to the point where, I don't know, now you're in a groove. Now you're making things happen. I can imagine for your podcast. Okay, you got microphones. You got your laptop right over there. You're sort of in the game now, right? Without a lot of stress, without a lot of energy expended. And then because there's going to be times in everything. I would love to hear your perspective on this. There's definitely times in my life where it's not going to always be up. You know, I talk in the Big 5 for Life book, I talk about something called an ascending life curve. So most people's curve in life is just up and down, up and down, up and down. And the highs are about the same high and the lows are about the same low. And this is the way most people go through life. But if you're lucky enough to get locked in on something that you're excited about, to be inspired by other people, to have good support structures, that your life curve actually looks different. It actually climbs. So you have highs and you have lows, but then the next high is a little bit higher than what used to be that previous high. And at some point you arrive at this amazing place where your lows are now higher than what used to be your highs. And that's a cool spot to be.
Yeah.
So it's not that you're not going to have lows. It's not like you're not going to have obstacles, but those are way better than what it used to be, you know?
Yeah, I have a few questions about this thing. I think my personal reference is also that when I became more successful and when I followed my passion more, that maybe not my highs were higher, but sometimes I also think my lows are lower. That the weight on my shoulders is bigger. So when I'm in a low, I experience it as a deeper low than when my life was more flat. And I consciously choose for a life that's not flat. I don't want to flat out in emotions. But what's your vision on this?
So funny you say that. So I think actually if you were able to regress yourself and physically experience the emotions at the previous point and the new point, that you'd find that the low is actually higher. And I'll give you an example of that. Yeah. So I was listening to something the other day and they gave a great example. They said, when you are an athlete and you start off and you're in like, I don't know what they call it here, but if you're like 9 years old, 10 years old, right? Yeah. So, and then you're really good and you decide you want to play for your junior high team. So when you're like, I don't know, 13 or 14, there's a certain level of training that's required to be good enough because the pyramid of athletes gets tighter, you know? And then if you want to play at your high school level, well, you really need to bring your game to a whole nother level, right? And then if you want to play at the university level, it's something else. The Olympic level is something even else. And then the professional level is something above and beyond that even more. And his point was that you're always constantly trying to improve. That as long as you want to be improving what you are good at and taking it to another level, it's never going to feel just like, oh, it's so easy. Because the opponents are better, the training is tougher, but that when you accomplish whatever that is, when you get the joy of walking in the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, that is what makes all of that stuff that felt like such big lows worth it.
Yeah.
Because the life experience you're going after is that much more powerful, that much more spectacular.
Yeah. So you're playing life at a higher level.
Yeah.
And you still experience lows, but objectively, those lows are less low than your previous.
Well, so let's use your example because I can see where this would feel like it. So let's say you tried out for the Olympics when you're 18 and you don't make it. That's your low. And if you had been training for 2 or 3 years leading up to that point and you get cut from the team right leading up to the Olympics, I can totally understand where the feeling of that low would be worse than if you hadn't even tried. Except when you put it in perspective, I got to try out for the Olympic team. My skills were so good that I was one of the last people in consideration for the Olympic team.
Yeah.
Now that low, you start to like really reframe just how low that really is, right?
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's time to me to get off the pity party bus and appreciate the opportunity I have in front of me.
Well, maybe at the moment where I started to live more, actually, I think I ignited the human in me. So I lived more intensely. So I experienced emotions more intensely.
Yeah.
So maybe my experience of lows is bigger, but that's a good thing because I like to live. I like to feel emotions because that's what makes humans, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, you could be living it numb.
Yeah, numb. That's the word. Like the gray area. You're not a great. I told you like a few minutes ago about Remco Klaassen, the Dutch Tony Robbins. I called him.
Yeah.
He says a lot of people are not happy, but they're also not depressed enough to do something about it.
Right.
So they live in this gray middle area, and I lived there when I was a consultant for a Dutch corporate.
Yeah. So there's an amazing quote from Buddhism which says, dissatisfaction is the first step to enlightenment.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to allow yourself to be dissatisfied, because you're always sort of in that pleasantly gray area, it's not happy, it's not great, but it's not horrible. Or if you're not willing to ask the question, what is it that's making me dissatisfied? And what on the opposite of that would actually make me satisfied?
Yeah.
Then you can get to, and this is, I think, what happens to sometimes, and this is what I think is really sad. In those scenarios, that's the person who gets to age 65, 70 and looks back and is like, damn it. I could have done it. I could have been the guy who tried to be a podcaster. I could have been the one who tried to be an author. I had it inside of me. And I just never allowed myself to go for it.
So being dissatisfied and hungry is a great thing.
I think so. I think that's part of our, we were talking about internal guidance systems, right? How your internal wiring.
Yeah.
And in the book Life Safari that I wrote, I talk about, I'm potentially going to spoil it for you, but I will try not to. So
you go ahead. There's
this amazingly wise woman in Africa, and she talks about that prior to being born, it's like there's this giant wall of destinations, and like a thing on a train station. You walk into a train station, there's all the places you can go. But prior to being born, you look at a similar type of board, but it's all challenges. And you pick before you're born. You know what? I'll take lack of self-confidence, and I'll take difficult childhood because my parents are this, right?
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, why in the world would we ever do that? And the example I come up with is that it's similar to sport. If I gave you a soccer ball, a football, and you went off to the field and I was like, Tice, go have the day of your dreams playing football. Okay, you go out to the field, there's nobody there. There's just an empty goal and you have a ball and you kick it into the goal and you're like, wow, this is awesome for like 10 minutes. And at some point you're like, all right, I'm kind of bored now.
Yeah.
And so what can you do? Well, I'll call a friend, right? And so you call a couple of friends, they come out to the field and we all work as a team and, oh, I'll kick to you and then I'll kick to you and then we kick a goal, yay! But after about 15 minutes of that, you're kind of like, okay, we're awesome. So what do we do in life to make it more interesting so that we grow? We add defenders. And in the book, the character of Mama Gombe, this very wise African woman, says this is what we're choosing prior to birth. We are choosing these challenges because we know that when we overcome these, then we will have grown. Then we will feel like we have really accomplished something.
Yeah, great. In my keynotes, I always ask the audience, what is happiness?
Yeah.
Maybe you guys already know the answer. What is happiness? And last week someone yelled, and he was in a wheelchair, and he yelled setbacks. And
Wow.
I really enjoyed that answer so much that he was like, setbacks makes happy.
Yeah.
Challenges makes happy. Maybe even enemies or opponents, a little, challenge.
The chance for us to grow.
Yeah, because that creates a chance to grow.
And I think the trick there is to not allow our brain wiring to get hooked into the challenge, because you can go the opposite direction with that. You can constantly be getting beyond the challenge, achieving a level of success and happiness, and then default back to the challenge again.
Yeah.
And so I think the trick is, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? I learn and then I move on.
Yeah.
And in the context of relationships, if you're in a relationship that is not the right relationship, it's not about, oh, this is one of those things I'm supposed to learn from, so I'll stick in this relationship for 10 years. So I really learn a lot.
Yeah.
No,
That's not the challenge.
That's not the goal. The goal is to identify what is not in this relationship that I want to be. Can I make that part of this relationship? Is it me? Do I need to make some changes in the way that I communicate or the way that I treat this person? Or is it being communicative so that they know that this is what would work for me? But if it is not working, get out. It's not about honoring the 10-year commitment so that you grow a lot.
Yeah.
No, grow fast, grow often, and then get forward. Yeah.
Okay, and in a moment we'll get back to your life story and we'll talk about the Y Cafe. But I have to ask you a question. You were talking about, first of all, you were giving some real concrete piece of advice, like find your role models. So if you want to achieve something, if you want to become a podcaster, just an example, you can buy my podcast training, my online podcast training, or just do what you're...
Well, and I think that's a great point. And let me throw this out there because I think a lot of people struggle with this idea that self-promotion. And so let's digest this a little bit. Let's dissect this. That depending on the money beliefs that you have, and I used to have some very unsupportive money beliefs, you will sabotage yourself over and over and over again. And an example of that is when I was a kid, I was told that people who have a lot of money must have ripped someone off. They could still be nice, right? But they must have ripped somebody off or cheated someone at some point. And so I was told this when I was a kid. You're a child, you don't even think about this. It just enters the bloodstream, enters the brain patterns. And if you're not careful, this will constantly exist in your thought process.
So this was your belief.
This was my belief, right? And so here's how this manifested itself, that I would be doing something that was genuinely contributing in some sort of way. Well, in our society today, the more you contribute, the more people want to say thank you, right? And they're going to say thank you in all likelihood by rewarding you. And these days they reward you typically by paying you something. And so if someone wants to be a podcaster, they love the work that you do, Tyson, they say, dude, I would love to, I have my own version of that, but I like what you do and I really want to learn from that. And so I would like to say thank you. And the way I'm going to say thank you is I would like to take this course that you offer because I think that's a faster way for me to get where I want to go. If you're not comfortable with that, over time, you will sabotage your own success. And this is what I used to do. I would rise to a certain level of contribution and then I would blow it up. And my friends would be like, dude, what are you doing? It's going so well. Why are you quitting? I don't know. I just want to try something different. Right? And I could never quite articulate why I would do it. And sometimes I would self-sabotage it. It wasn't that I would quit. I would literally just do something so stupid that it would blow itself up.
Yeah.
And eventually what I discovered is that I had this conflicting belief system. So here's a great way to get beyond that. And here's how I think it's relative to this self-promotion aspect. So for me, the way I got beyond it was I thought to myself, wow, do I know anyone who is really making a positive contribution in the world that it also has a lot of money?
Yeah.
It took me like 2 seconds to come up with good examples, right? And I remember to this day where they were Oprah Winfrey, the broadcaster who does so many amazing things, and this author named Wayne Dyer. And now that I had those examples in my head, it was like I could no longer hold this belief system because it was two opposite contrasting systems trying to compete with each other. And I had to let go of this false belief that I was told when I was a kid. And so what this means is that if you're going to do something that you love and you're really making a positive difference, people are going to want to hang in your space. And if you're a musician, they're going to want to listen to your music. If you're an author, they're going to want to buy your books. If you're doing a cool podcast, they're going to want to be a part of that. They're going to want to listen to it. They're going to want to download it. And that means that you as the source of that contribution are going to be paid.
And what is maybe even more interesting, where did you find the clearness that you saw the belief you had? Because you now elaborated on fixing it. You rewrote your belief.
Yeah.
But what did you do that you thought, wow, I have this belief about money?
So it was I just came to this, I think I just sat down and gave myself some quiet time to think that said, what is this belief that I'm holding? And, a good way to do it is looking at past patterns. So we are very pattern-based human beings. And so if you look at, okay, I blew this one up and I self-sabotaged that one and I quit that one, and you start to see this pattern, you can start to identify, well, why did the pattern happen? And I think for me, that was what happened. And so, I'll give you a very specific example in my own life. And that is, for years, people would read the books and they'd be like, John, like, can you help me? I really want to take my life in this amazing direction that you talk about, where you're living a life on point, you're following your purpose. Every day you're excited to get up in the morning, and I want to live my big 5 for life. So, what's the way to do that? I don't know. Like I went and backpacked around the world for a year. That's how I got clear. Like, I don't know. But it was actually here in the Netherlands. I received a lot of requests from people and they said, would you come and would you teach a course? Like, I've never taught a course ever. So, okay. Right. And so I sat down and for 30 days, I asked myself questions. So I guess in answering your question, I think part of the trick for me is to allow myself to ask questions, and asking questions and writing down my answers gives me a lot of guidance. And so this, long story short, this evolved into what is called the Big 5 for Life Discovery Course. And so anybody who is in a state of uncertainty and wants to become certain, they can go through this 2-day experience and they become very, very certain about, oh, wow, this is the direction I want my life to go. So here's to your point of like willingness to tell people about what you do. So I would be on a stage and someone in the audience during the Q&A would be like, so John, like, what's the path to discover my Big 5 for life? And I felt so like uncomfortable saying that, well, I've got this course you could go to and it's really life-changing, right? I felt so uncomfortable telling about, well, this other book, The Big 5 for Life. I was just afraid. I don't know what I was afraid of, but I was just so in my own way about this. And finally, a friend of mine changed my life. They're like, what in God's name are you doing up there? A, you look like an idiot. And B, do you believe in what your books are doing? And I was like, totally. And he's like, why do you believe that? Because I get these amazing emails and these amazing messages from people. And he's like, okay, so don't you want to help those people in the audience? Yes, of course I want to help them. Then for God's sakes, get out of your own way and just tell them that this is available. And to your point about the podcast, if someone really wants to do a podcast, like, don't you want to help them?
Totally.
Right. And if we're so like, no, I don't know, I guess you could do this. It's kind of a good, like, no, just tell it what it is.
But yeah, to be honest, this 100% relates to me because I now have an online course in podcasting, but I want to launch an online course in finding your happiness or finding your way in life. But I'm really, I get stuck all the time because I think, who am I to tell people,
Yeah.
if you do these 5 things, then you will experience more happiness in life.
Okay, so I had that literally those exact words were the words that I had when people started to ask me to speak, and then with the courses, the Big 5 for Life course, I had that exact same thing. Who am I to? I mean, those are the exact same words I used in my head. And I'll tell you what I discovered. It's not a question of who am I to? And this goes for everybody who's listening out there. It's who are you not to? Like, everybody has something to offer. And I think this is one of the biggest opportunities we have in life, is to allow ourselves to let the genius inside come forth. Tice, if you gave me a blueprint of that building that I can see through your window here, and you said to me, John, I need you to help me understand the engineering schematics associated with that building, because there is a problem on the 3rd floor and we need to solve this. I literally would look at you right now and be like, dude, the building's going to burn. I am not able to do that. So I appreciate the confidence that you have in me, but that is not my genius, my man. Right? But if you said to me, John, I've got a person here who is really interested in taking their life to the next level. Would you sit and talk with them for 10 minutes and help them identify maybe some of the places where they're stuck and some of the opportunities that they could have in front of them? That's my genius.
Yeah.
And so everybody listening to this podcast has a genius. And this is, I think, one of the great opportunities in life, is to figure out what that genius is and then let it be out there.
And you also gave us a piece of advice. How can I figure out my genius? One of your pieces of advice was ask questions, ask the right questions to yourself. And also you said, if you have answers to those questions, then you can look at, you looked at like the margins of your book and stuff. And I looked at like my podcast heroes. And that will help you to struggle less in the startup phase. But then I have this burning question. Because when we think we have discovered what we want, and even if we use these life hacks to make it a little bit more easy, we will also experience that it's really tough to pull through or to keep working. And how do you know the distinction between, okay, this is just a tough phase, but I have to get through this to achieve my real success and happiness,
right?
Or this is not the right direction.
Right.
And because when it's actually B and you think it's A, you're working on being stressed and have a burnout in like a couple of years.
Awesome question. Awesome question. And I think that is something that comes with life experience. You start to intuitively know when you're in a state of flow and when you're not in a state of flow. There's a great example. I was doing an interview in Taiwan one time, and I had this great visual come to me exactly around this question. And so it's water. Think of water in like a stream, a river. And the water is coming down the river, and it's like white water. There's big rocks. It's like not a huge river, but it's a river that's moving down a mountain. So at the bottom of the river is a lake, and that's where all the water is going into. And so if you think of water and the way it moves, think of like big rocks in the river, and there's tree branches in there. Especially in the culture in which I was raised, the theory was, okay, so you're the water coming down and you're trying to get to the lake, which is this thing that really matters to you. And so there's a giant rock, and you come down and you hit that rock. And in the culture that I was raised, it was like, you know what you do in this case? You back up and you hit the rock harder, right? You're going to go through this thing, man. You refuse to give up. You do not stop. You just go farther, faster, harder at this obstacle. And this is the way that I was trained. And then I think this is sort of the personification in a lot of movies and books too. But the truth is that water takes a completely different path. If you've ever watched it, water does something truly fascinating. Water will hit the rock. It will realize that there is an impediment to progress. And water will actually rotate around and look for what's called the path of least resistance. And then it moves down. And it doesn't just then effortlessly flow all the way to the lake. It's going to hit something else along the way too. But when it hits the something else, it will rotate around and look for the path of least resistance. So I think the big takeaway is when we encounter these obstacles, to ask ourselves, is this an opportunity for me to look for flow in the path of least resistance? Or is this one of those times when as we were talking about with the editing, I just need to man up, do the tough work to get the job done, because this is part of the process. And maybe the answer is the same thing we've been talking about, which is finding examples of other people who have already done what you want to do, see your experience. And so if you had gone through the process of learning about other podcasters and they were talking about, listen, when you're done with the podcast, like it's not over. Like you either are doing the editing work on the sound or you're handing that off to somebody. And then there's uploading it to the website and then there's promotions of it and the rest of that. And so if you knew that that was all part of the process, then you would just be like, all right, well, now's when I need to man up and do the tough work. This is going to feel a little out of flow, but this is necessary to have this.
Yeah.
So maybe I think that's part of the answer is having these role models, these examples, these who's, as I like to call them, and understanding that process. And that helps you understand whether it's grind it out or whether it's the wrong path.
I like it. It's very practical. So it's not like you have to meditate and feel your chakras and maybe...
If that works for somebody, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. I do think that there is a tremendous gift that we have inside of us around this intuitiveness. And so the example I like to use of the power of intuition is if you leave the house, you drive, you're 3 kilometers down the road and you're like, oh, I knew I was supposed to bring that thing with me. Like your, whatever it is, like a book or your headphones or whatever. If you don't really honor the feeling of that, you're going to do that same thing for the rest of your life. But if you honor that connecting with your intuition, eventually what will happen is you'll get in the car, you'll back out of the driveway and you're like, headphones. Yeah. And then the third time you'll be in the house and you're just about to open the door and you're like, headphones. And eventually what happens over time is when you're thinking about the rest of your day, your intuition goes, headphones. And you remember to actually grab them and take them with you before you even leave the house. Yeah. This is in tune with what we're talking about. So whether you want to call it chakra alignment or whatever, but this getting in touch with your intuitive capabilities on an unconscious level can accelerate your progress in anything. Yeah. On a lot of levels.
It's a great skill to connect with your intuition. Yeah. You can see it as a muscle, train that muscle.
I love that analogy because I think it is a muscle. Yeah, and I think the more you use it, the better you get at it. And this applies to all walks of life. I'm an athlete. I've been playing beach volleyball for 30 years now. And there are times when my opponent will go back to serve and before they even turn around, I actually know where the ball is going.
Yeah. Now the viewers on YouTube are like, that's why he looks so ripped.
Got the pipes, man. Yeah, what can I tell you? So, 6-pack right here. You can't see it, but it's a 6-pack underneath that, right?
Great guns. So to wrap...
Because with Photoshop, I could make it look like I have the ripped abs of a 22-year-old. Yes.
Great. So to wrap this part of the interview up and let's get back to your story and the book, The Why Cafe. I think if you hit like a tough phase when you think you're working on your dream or whatever... for the more spiritual people, connect to your intuition. Yeah, you will find the answer. And for the more practical people, it's just a question: is this normal? Is this to be expected? Yeah, that this is just something I have to go through before I can achieve what I really want to achieve.
Yeah, and I think one of the great opportunities is the blending of those two realities.
Yeah,
because sometimes you can be so on the spiritual side that you've forgotten that there's actually effort required. Yeah, and sometimes you can be so on the effort side that you forget that there is this whole other intuitive spiritual side that if you tap into that, it makes your life so much easier. So the blend is critical. Yeah.
Okay, let's step into a time machine. A few years back, you ended up, being a consultant, or you actually you work for a corporate in the beginning years of your career, right?
Yeah. So we started on the story. So my dream was to become a pilot. I could not become a pilot because of a heart condition that had never been diagnosed. This ripped everything away from me. I had been working for since I was 12 years old. This was a horrible, horrible down point in my life. And now I look back to where we were having in that conversation. And if I'd have been a pilot, I never would have written the books. And if I hadn't written the books, I could never have the life I have now. And the life I have now is exponentially better than what I was envisioning back then.
Because in 2002, you decided to go for a trip around the world. Yeah. What was the... what was the reason actually? It's a big decision. I'm going to travel the world for a year while you're in a good job for a big corporate.
Yeah. So when I found out I couldn't fly anymore, I got my MBA. I went back to school, which I swore that I would never do. Yeah. But I went back to school. I got my MBA, and then I got hired to work as a strategy consultant. And so I was working for big companies. I would get on an airplane at Monday morning at 5 in the morning and catch a flight to some city. And I'd be working with the clients until Thursday or Friday, and then I'd head home and then do the same thing next Monday, right? And this was I was treated very well in the firm where I worked. I was very good at the work that I did, but I didn't have the heart connection to the job. And I remember constantly coming home on a Friday night, getting a cab from the airports, being in the cab, going back to wherever I was staying, and just thinking to myself, wow, is this it? Like, I don't see this as being the 10-year path to happiness at all. And I would look at the people that were 10 years older than me, talking about our philosophy of like, okay, you know, who can you imitate? So I looked at the people that were 10 years older than me doing this job, and I thought, that's going to be me 10 years from now. I don't want that to be me. You know, that's not the life I saw for myself. So I was in my early 30s when I left it all behind to go see the world, and I backpacked around the world, and they all used the same terminology. They either said, you're crazy or you're nuts. And they couldn't understand this at all, that at 32, you would make such an unbelievable decision. I mean, I was on track to become a partner in the firm, and you know, you just don't do that when you're in your 30s. And this is the kind of thing you do when you're 19. And everybody had an answer why it was stupid. But I can tell you that after the first 7 days on the road, like all those excuses made no sense.
Yeah. By the way, this is exactly the reason why I or the way that I found out that my job at the consultancy firm.
Really? You traveled?
No, but I was okay. It was not like if you interviewed me like 10 years ago, I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm 21. I'm a consultant for a big company. Check out my my name card or my
your fancy business card.
Yeah, my business card. But then when I looked at people 10 years older than I was, and I thought, well, in 10 years, I'm gonna be maybe a manager of other consultants in this company. And so it was like the vision of my life in 10 years that made me depressed. The same as you mentioned. Yeah,
and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with those jobs. That if you love being a manager, that's fantastic. I love that. And if you love being a pilot and your job is a pilot and you really enjoy that, fantastic. Like that is your genius.
Yeah. I mean, that. A lot of people would rather die than record a podcast or being on stage.
Yeah, so exactly. So excellent analogy. So I don't think I know neither one of us is saying like there's anything wrong with those, but just for you and for me, when we looked at those, that wasn't our path.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great opportunity that everybody has is this sort of projecting ourselves into the future and saying, are we going to be cool with that?
Yeah. So do that. Project your current job, profession in 5 years and 10 years. And does that excite you or does that like scare the shit out of you?
Yeah. And maybe the rest of your life too. So if you're, you know, the job is one aspect of it. Project your relationship 10 years in the future.
That could be a painful one for some people.
Right. You, because right now maybe you're operating on this is a 6 out of 10, but it's, as you said, it's just okay, but I'm afraid of being alone. Okay. Well, 10 years from now, you're going to have invested, 3,650 days into this relationship of being just okay. And now you're going to be 30 something.
Yeah. Some listeners are now, thank you, John. Now I have to have a conversation with my partner this night, this evening.
Well, and the amazing thing about that, not to head off on a ridiculous tangent, but I will anyway, which is, I think in relationships, one of the big takeaways is so many times we're afraid of hurting the other person. A lot of times we're afraid for ourselves too. We're wimps and we're afraid of being on our own, but we can also be so afraid of hurting that other person. But the truth is that if you're in the relationship and it's a 6 out of 10, how do you think it is for the other person? Like it's a 6 out of 10 for them too. Let's not kid ourselves. And if you let that go for 10 more years, then you have in essence tied up 10 years of their life at a 6 out of 10 because of your insecurity and your unwillingness to say, I think you deserve a 10 out of 10 and I'm not the guy.
Awesome. I like that. And in back to your travel, in 7 days, you felt already.
Oh yeah.
What did you feel?
I was on. So it took 38 hours to get to Koh San Road in Thailand. That was the starting point.
Yeah.
And I walked out on Koh San Road where there's, honest to God, there probably still is, but back then there was the best tom yum soup for €1 that you can imagine in your life. And I walked out on that street, and that is a street where all the backpacker places are. So I went from being in a place where I didn't know anybody who had ever done anything as crazy as putting on a giant backpack and going to see the world for a year. 38 hours later, I'm on a street where everybody got a backpack on and is out traveling the world. And this is a big takeaway because when I asked myself, well, how come I didn't find any of these people at home? Because they're not at home. They're off backpacking around the world. If you want to meet other podcasters, right, don't go where there are no podcasters. Like it seems so incredibly obvious now, but it wasn't obvious to me back then that whatever you're excited about, whatever you're passionate about, allow yourself to immerse yourself in that reality. And so literally 7 days into that reality, I realized all the fears I had, all the great concerns were completely invalid.
And what did you discover more about your intuition, your life path, maybe?
Yeah, well, one of the great things about traveling overseas is that when you don't speak the language and you have to find out how to get food and shelter in a place where you know none of the customs, none of the language, etc. And this is incredibly empowering because food and shelter are like those basic necessities. We're like at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I don't do this, I will die. And when you learn to do this stuff, it gives you tremendous confidence. And then you continue to ramp it up. So as you do other amazingly cool things out backpacking the world, and again, this changed my life. So I'm not saying this is everybody's path, but this did for me. That when you do these types of things, then you come back home and the stuff back home seems so small in terms of the size of the challenge. I'll give you an example. So I was in the Amazon and I wanted to go hike deep into the Amazon. And so I took a barge where you had to sleep on a hammock for, I think, 19 hours. Mm-hmm. And to find someone to take me into the Amazon, I literally got into this tiny little town in Peru and I'm wandering the streets and a big dude comes up to me and he's like, Amazon? Right? And I don't speak much Spanish at the time. And so I was like, yeah, I want to go to the Amazon, right? And he's like, guide. And he's pointing to himself, right? Now imagine this. I'm in a town in the middle of a country where I don't know anyone. I'm talking to a guy who I really can't even talk to, who is a big dude. Like he could have killed me in seconds. And he's saying to me, Amazon. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's go to the Amazon together, right? And so next thing I know, and so he takes me to the market and he's pointing to the things I need to buy to go to the Amazon, including this hammock. Next thing you know, I'm on a barge floating up the river into the depths, the hearts of the Amazon. And the only things I really know are there's going to be insane amounts of mosquitoes. There's fish that can kill me. This ought to be awesome, right?
Well, fish, I think there are other animals.
Yeah, fish and others, you're right. Yeah, exactly. If it's not the fish, it'll be something else large that kills me. And so we get to a port. And by port, I mean basically like a random stop on the river where there's a wood shack. And he's kind of like, this is us, right? Oh my God, I get out and I'm like, where are we? We're in the middle of the jungle, which is really what I wanted. But then when the reality hit me, it was like, holy cow, I may die here. Well, then it consisted of hiking for 6 hours through just unbelievable terrain. It's so hot that, I mean, I live in Florida where it's hot anyway, as you were saying, because you were there in July. It is so hot. I'm like soaked through in 5 seconds. The mosquitoes are so big that they don't really care that you have mosquito repellent on. They're like, I'm going to eat you anyway. And we're hiking across these rushing rivers where you have to literally shimmy across a log. And I'm carrying 60 pounds of gear. And I'm thinking, if I fall in, within seconds, I'm going to be so far down that river, nobody would ever find me. So I'm literally thinking I'm going to die. Like, I'm never going to make it out of this. There's these trees that have these giant spikes on them. And if you fall into this, you are definitely dead, right? Yeah. Well, this goes on for day after day. But I will tell you, Tice, by the time I got out of there, the idea of going back home and doing something that was previously viewed by me as challenging is like nothing. It's nothing. So I think one of the great things about putting ourselves in places where we are pushing in the direction we want to go, even though we can't quite explain what it is that we grow and then the rest of the stuff doesn't seem as big. I mean, how were you your very first podcast? Were you like super confident? I got this, no problem. He's laughing. For those of you who cannot see him right now, he's laughing.
I was actually in my car to Angela Groothuizen, a very famous person in the Netherlands. She's one of the coaches of The Voice of Holland, so the big TV show. And I was in my car to her house, and I said to myself, wow, I think I have never interviewed someone before in my entire life. That was not a great timing for that realization. Right.
Wow, I should have thought of that last week.
Yeah, I should have. Yeah. So no, I wasn't super self-confident.
Right. And yet now, how are you? After you've done like, what, 150?
Yeah, more than 150. Yeah. Actually, super. Yeah. Right. Maybe even walk in the park. Sometimes it's like,
Exactly. So I did an event recently, earlier this year, and they asked me to come and speak at something called the World Leadership Summit. And they contacted me 3 weeks out from the event. This is so unusual. I mean, usually when someone contacts you, it's 6 months ahead of time. They say, we've got this big event coming up. So 3 weeks ahead of time, I get a message. They said, we'd like to host, we're hosting this big event and we'd like to come and have you do the keynote. One of the keynotes, they said, we've got a few speakers that are doing it. And I said, well, it's only 3 weeks away. Like, why such a short sort of lag time?
Yeah.
And they said, well, because you're going to be on stage right after President Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama. And so we just got clearance from his people that he's actually going to do it. And so we couldn't announce to the world that we're interested in doing it until 3 weeks away. And so now it's 3 weeks away. And so now we'd like you to come and do it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I've been speaking for the last, I don't know, probably for the last 15 years. And so the idea of doing a speaking event, that in of itself isn't intimidating. And I only talk about what I love. So that's pretty easy. But the idea of standing on a stage in front of 15,000 people in a stadium and being the guy who is on stage right after Barack Obama, who is perceived by so many people as one of the greatest presidents that ever came out of the US.
Barack Obama is basically your support act.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So it's like, okay, that's a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Right. And I will tell you that I think it was a month and a half after that, I had a speaking event for 5,000 people. Walking into the Obama event, while I wasn't nervous, I was definitely a little more like, this is different, right? I was shimmying across one of those logs across the raging river, thinking to myself, I need to be on my best game. I need to bring my A+++ game, right? I will tell you that the few weeks later, a month later, whatever it was, when I had 5,000 people I was speaking to, I literally walked on stage. I was like, what? I mean, this is no problem, right? Like, what are you talking about?
This is a Monday morning.
This is a Monday morning. Yeah, exactly. Am I dressed appropriately? Yeah, good. I remembered to put on my shirt today. And I loved that experience because, again, this is no different than for you with the first podcast or taking on a new challenge. For me, taking on a new challenge. This is how we grow. And when we grow, that is what prepares us to do the next big challenge.
Yeah.
If someone had said to me before I had ever done a single speaking event, hey, we'd like to go and have you talk to 15,000 people in a stadium and you're going to follow Barack Obama, there's no way.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
there's just no way.
Yeah.
I'd have been in like the hospital in a panic attack.
Yeah. And is the takeaway of this story also that it's very valuable to put yourself in a different environment? You don't have to travel the world for a year, what you did, but when you snap out of your normal life, that really puts you in a position where you can reflect on your life from a distance.
Yeah, awesome example that if backpacking around the world, leaving everything behind and backpacking around the world is not your thing, then yes, allow yourself to do different new things. One of the things that we talk about in the Big 5 for Life course is to restructure things in your life so that it challenges both you as a person, but also challenges your neural net. Because I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're going from one point to another driving, and it's a route that you've done 100 times. And you get up, you jump in your car, you get there, and you literally cannot even remember the drive. Like you were on such autopilot.
Yeah.
And I think this is what happens with a lot of people with life. It's, oh my gosh, it's Christmas again. What happened to the last 12 months? I don't know, man. I was just on autopilot.
Yeah.
And that by allowing ourselves to do different things, and one of the things we do in the course, we literally tell them, move something in your house furniture-wise, like 2 major pieces of furniture. And if you have a desk that you work at every day, literally move everything around on your desk.
Yeah.
Because this challenges the neural net and forces it to recalibrate everything in your brain. And this is really good for us as human beings. And we fight this because our brains want to do the same thing today that we did yesterday because it's a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
But one of the best things we can do is to implement these changes. So I love your idea. If you're not going to do something drastic, which is totally fine if that's not your thing, drive a different route to work. I don't care if it takes you 10 minutes longer. Trust me, the benefit will be so good for you because you're going to notice stuff that you haven't noticed over the last 9 months when you take that same exact road every day.
Awesome. And this is something you can do every day. Like there are multiple moments this day where you can do this. In the context of like going abroad, you did a year, but when I'm on holiday for 3 weeks in Florida, that's really 3 weeks of self-development for me.
Yeah.
But even when I'm going away for a weekend next week, that's also a great moment. Even when I'm just in the nature for 3 hours or 2 hours, just walking all by myself, that gives me enough distance from my normal life to have new insights.
Yeah, and I love the nature example that you just talked about. I too find tremendous inspiration when I'm in nature. Walking in the woods, walking along the ocean, that to me is so different from when I'm sitting at a desk and have my phone right there and my computer. It's just a different energy.
And was it after or during your 1 year world travel where you wrote the Why Cafe in like 21 days?
Yeah, it was after. I came back from that experience and had gotten a call from someone who I used to consult with. And they said, hey, we heard you're back in the country. I need a consultant. Are you willing to do it? And so I went back and I did that consulting assignment, and it was a 4-month assignment. When I came back on the very last day of that assignment, I was on my flight and I was thinking about sort of these two realities, you know, backpacking around the world, which I loved. And I think I loved it because at my core, I'm an adventurer and I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. And I had let my life at different points in my life, I had let myself get to the point where I was in this state of just doing the same thing every day. I was on autopilot. Yeah. And that's not who I am. And so this traveling around the world was every day something new, every day a new adventure, every day pushing myself in some capacity. Whether it's like walking in a new country and you're like, what fruit is that? Like, I don't even, how do you eat that? You know?
Is that a food or a sex toy?
Yeah, there you go. Great example, right? And so I know it probably sounds ridiculous to somebody who's listening, but the idea that you're looking at a piece of fruit and you don't know what it is and you have to ask the person, like, literally, do you peel this or do you just eat? Is it like a banana or is it like an apple where you eat the whole thing or do you peel? These small little things, when you're an adventurous person at heart, carry your energy a long way. It just makes you feel like you're on the right path. And so, yeah, for me, that's a big part of it is doing these types of things.
Yes. And the ondertitel, the subtitle is an inspiring journey towards yourself. I'm now translating the Dutch translated title to English again, so I don't know what the subtitle in English is.
It's a story about the meaning of life.
A story about the meaning. Wow, that's just a light title. It's a book about the meaning of life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And what was your number one thought when you wrote this book? It was like, I have to have these thoughts on paper. What was it? Yeah,
it was way cooler than that, actually.
Okay, cool.
So I came back from the experience and I did this consulting assignment. On my last day, I'm sitting on an airplane and I had these two worlds colliding in my head. And I thought to myself, what would I tell someone right now is the meaning of life? And
wow.
Yeah, and I always say that I write for myself.
Which is a great
first.
question.
Yeah, because I mean, this is what I was searching for. This is when I felt like I wanted to be off of autopilot. Although I didn't articulate it at the time and probably couldn't have, I was asking myself, what is the meaning of life? And so I started writing something out on the airplane, and then I woke up the next morning and something inside said, sit down and start typing. And I think that because I just spent the year backpacking around the world, trusting my intuition, we were talking about that earlier, without judging that thought at all, I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and start typing. And so I sat down and I started typing. And I got up the next morning and something said, do it again. Sat down and I typed again. And it was very much flow. I never read what I was typing. I never thought, oh, what am I going to type tomorrow? I just sat down and typed. And this went on for 21 straight days. And after the 21 days were done, it felt done. It felt like this flow was complete. And so I put it on a shelf. I let it sit there for a week. I came back and I read it. And here we are now, 3 million copies later, translated into 41 languages. It's been bestseller of the year 5 years in a row. And I will tell you what is in the book, for those that read it, is almost word for word what was on those pages after the 21 days. And this is when you're asked to do something that is bigger than you. I can't say that there was a grand master plan that I was going to write a book that would sell this copies. I never thought that when I said I'm going to go backpack around the world. Yeah. And I think the big takeaway is that you can't start the second adventure until you start the first one. I had to allow myself to go do this thing that I was excited about doing, that I'd wanted to do for a long time, which was to go backpack around the world without necessarily knowing what was going to be phase 2. Yeah. And then phase 2 started with sit down and start typing. Well, I could have never imagined back then that it would be in 41 languages or a bestseller, or that I'd get these amazing heartfelt letters from people. But I had to complete step 2 in order to get to step 3, which was that kind of stuff happening. So sometimes you just have to trust the process a bit with this.
Yeah, I think that this is really important to feel the balance between experiencing stuff, so the process, and making plans and goals for your life. Because I think the self-help world sometimes teaches us too much to plan everything. Yeah. But you have to let go and trust the process, as long as you have the connection with your intuition, right?
Yeah, an amazing example of that in the traveling world, and then let's jump back to the podcasting world. In the traveling world, it would be, okay, so if I don't set any goal, I'm never going to actually leave my house.
Yeah.
So the goal might be, I want to go travel the world. That would be the overarching, what I call PFE in the book, your purpose for existing. At that moment, you say, I want to be a world traveler. Okay, so let's figure out your big 5 for life as it relates to world travel. Where are the 5 countries you want to visit? Okay, I want to go to Thailand. I want to go to Peru, and you name 5 countries.
Yeah.
But this is where the flexibility comes in now, to your point. I hit the ground in Lima, Peru. I got 6 weeks to wander. I have no plan. I have no schedule.
Yeah.
I have no dogmatic system I have to follow. Where the wind takes me, where my intuition guides me, where cool conversations that happen at a random bar, that's where I go. And that to me is the joy of life.
Yeah.
There's the essence of clarity and certainty, and then there's the essence of flow.
Awesome. I
mean,
this.
when you started your podcast, as you said, you got the microphones. Did you have any idea it would be as big as it is now?
No, it's totally. I had the goal. I want to capture people's stories.
Okay.
And I also have like a business goal because I want to work on my personal branding, my personal marketing.
Yeah.
But in the first place, I thought I'm going to do 1 week an interview and the other week is going to be a Thais only episode.
Okay.
And I did that for like 10 episodes and I found out that doing interviews is more fun, it's more easy, and takes less time even.
Yeah.
Because for the Thais only episodes, I have to do all this creative work and what am I going to talk about and stuff. And that's just one of the 10,000 examples of, yeah, I had a goal, but I also had to like let loose and see where the process takes me.
Yeah, and so that I love that example because if you were the type of person who said, no, the goal is I'm going to do alternating podcasts. I'm going to do it for 52 weeks. And that's what I'm doing. And at the 10-week mark, when you realize like it was off, right? You were basically the example of the water and the rock. You were just like, I'm beating my head against this rock till I go through it, right? If you just stuck with that, you would not have had the success that you have. And so that is the example of allowing your intuition to tell you, this is not the goal for the sake of the goal. That the goal here is to create amazing content, to have a good time, to learn a lot, create stuff so that the listeners can learn a lot too and progress their lives. And this isn't doing it. This me just talking on the microphone doesn't feel as fun. Like that I think is a big takeaway because it's very easy in life to get locked in and not to allow ourselves to disconnect. Yeah. And that's such a balancing act because it also goes the other way where this is what we were talking about with the editing, right? You got to dig in and you got to do the editing.
So I think it's a great exercise for the listener. So ask yourself the question, do I have to have more clear goals? Do you have to have more focus? Or are you actually a control freak and you're holding on to your goal too much and you have to...
Yeah, or you disengage too early.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
so I got an idea about that. So
go ahead.
Let me ask it to you in the form of a question. So how did you know? Like you mentioned a couple of different adjectives. So you've got 10 and 10 going right there. Yeah. Right. How did you know it was time to shift just to the one and not the other?
I think one, I just felt it. That so in theory, I thought the Thais only episodes are going to be like the most important ones. But when I did it, how you say that in practice, in real life?
In practice. Yeah.
In practice, I felt, wow, it's kind of tough. I don't like it. My throat even hurt. Because I was maybe a little bit too tense.
Yeah.
Well, I can be on stage for hours, do interviews for hours, and my throat is okay. So it was, and the intuition and my body, and that was combined with like more rational arguments, like okay, this takes a lot of time, a lot of preparation. I feel empty after recording an episode. I missed the connection. So yeah, that was all together.
So if I was to summarize that as a takeaway for the listeners, and I'm thinking of that in my own life as well, like what has enabled me to make these changes when I embark on what I think is going to be a great adventure, only to discover it's actually the wrong path. And so what I hear you saying is it's the combination of the practical as well as the intuitive. And that's what told you, nah, that's not it.
And the fun thing is, by the way, now I'm oftenly have the thought, maybe I should do that.
Interesting.
Again, maybe now the moment is right.
Yeah. So that's a key, and that's a great takeaway too. Sometimes it's not the idea that's wrong; it's the timing.
Yeah, totally. And about your book, the Why Cafe, the question of all the questions. John, what is the meaning of life? Or what is one of the biggest takeaways of this book?
Yeah, so the essence of the story is a guy he's living in the way that we were talking about. He's on okay, and he's going through his life and it's fine. It's not great, it's just fine.
Yeah.
And he's looking ahead and thinking, is this all it's going to be? And he heads off on a driving trip and wanders into this tiny little cafe in the middle of nowhere. And he flips over the cafe menu and there's 3 questions. The first one is, why are you here? And the second one is, do you fear death? And the third one is, are you fulfilled? And you can imagine if you walked into a cafe and saw those 3 questions, you'd be like, where am I? Right? And that's kind of his reaction. And he ends up starting to talk to people in the cafe and starts to explain what he's thinking about. And they start to share their stories with him. And he ends up, by the time he stays all night long, and by the time the night is done, he has this completely new perspective about what life overall is about and what his life in particular is about. Yeah. And it starts with that first question, why am I here?
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, 28,900 days on the planet is the average life. And the days tick by very quickly. So what are you going to do with them while you're here?
And I think that second question is maybe more that catches my attention the most, because it's really specific and it also refers to one of my fears in life.
Okay.
And the second question is,
do you fear death?
Yeah, do you fear death? Ben je bang voor de dood? What makes that you thought this question is so important? It has to be one of the 3 critical questions.
Well, I have to say that during the process of the 21 days of flow, there was no thought from me. I honestly say, I don't exactly know where the book came from. It seemed like it came from out there through here, and I just get to be the conduit for it.
Wow.
But I will tell you, in the context of that question, I don't think that what we fear is death. I think what we fear is getting to the end of our lives and realizing that we haven't really lived. And that moment is what we fear. The great news is that having that awareness is what creates that dissatisfaction we were talking about before. And that dissatisfaction is what propels us to ask the question, well, what would satisfaction look like?
Yeah.
And in what ways should my life go a little bit left or a little bit right to get me on a path where that is more my existence versus the one that I'm on right now? And so the question is a great impetus to stimulate our thinking so that when we get to the end of our lives, we can look back and we can say, you know what? It was awesome.
Yeah.
No regrets. No regrets.
Yeah. Well, that's a great sentence. Like, we're not afraid of death. We're not afraid of dying. We're afraid of being on our deathbed and realizing we haven't lived.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that sentence immediately triggered like some emotions and some thoughts, some things I can adjust in my life. Like, oh yeah,
that's awesome.
That's cool.
So sometimes I will tell you, now when I'm actively working on something and I'm writing, I'm very much in that state of flow. And I'm typing and there it is on the screen and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, that is so good. Like, I'm getting chills because I typed it and I'm like, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
And that's why I always say I'm always the first person who's supposed to read my own books. Because
awesome.
Yeah.
I like that sometimes when I'm on stage and when I'm really, really in the flow, like I think 1 or 2 out of 10 gigs, when it's like, your everything flows. Sometimes I say stuff like, and I'm like, I have to write this down.
Yeah.
This is inspiring stuff.
And I think that's actually part of the fun of life, is to say, well, where does it come from? I don't know. Maybe that's part of why you are here. So that first question, why are you here? Well, maybe Tice is here because he is a conduit to allowing these creative, inspiring thoughts to enter the world. And if you were at a desk job doing the work that you had done before, nobody would have ever heard the thoughts, either because they would have come into your head and you never would have written them down, or there just would have been no audience for that. To me, this is about finding your genius. And in what shape is that genius?
Yeah.
Is it standing on a stage? Is it working in an office where you get to manage people and create an amazing life for them in that office? Because there are so many people here in the Netherlands. I was just talking to my business colleague who runs the Big 5 for Life company here in the Netherlands, and he was sharing that burnout is a huge problem here. And so, you know what? if you are the person who manages an office and creates such a great office environment that those people love to come to work, they feel inspired when they're at work, they do great stuff at work, and then they go home with a smile on their face to be friendly and happy with their family, that is your genius, man. I mean, that is you at the highest level. That is the equivalent of you standing on the stage and having this moment flash through. It's the equivalent of me finding this moment when I'm typing and something comes through.
And the same goes for plumbers and hairdressers and accountants, and we go on and on.
Totally.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about life, is that there is no one defined path that everybody needs to follow.
Yeah.
It's about allowing you to be uniquely you in whatever way that is your gift.
Okay.
And that goes to the last question, actually. Are you fulfilled?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Are you fulfilled, to me, is it's fine if you know. So if you said, you know what? I believe that Tice, part of my path is to do this podcast. Right? And this is going back years before you started the podcast. I don't think I'm supposed to work in the office. I think I'm supposed to be a podcast guy. And I want to be on stages and I want to do that. And that's where the dream ended. Like, all you did was identify it. I don't think you'd be fulfilled.
Yeah.
If I'd had said, wow, I really want to go travel the world. Look at me. Gosh, that's so super smart. I figured out what I want to do with my life. And then I never left. I mean, come on.
Yeah, totally.
I wouldn't feel it.
So if you want to figure out these 3 questions, and I'm saying this to the listener right now, like, why are you here? Are you afraid of death? And are you fulfilled? Then I think The Why Cafe is a book you should definitely buy and read, right?
And I will tell you that it's a book that so many times when I ask people, like, how did you hear about the book? They say, you know what, my best friend gave it to me.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Or
and there's a cup of coffee or even a cup of cappuccino on the cover. So that's,
see, there you go.
That's like with a question mark in it. Yeah.
One of my favorite things actually about the book is that I often hear from somebody, I don't read, but I read that and I really liked it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be one of those persons because I this is maybe a confession, but I barely read. Yeah. But this is a book that that might read this. I think the chance is pretty big that I'm going to read
it's short.
This.
It's only 160 pages, which was, I think, part of the reason that when it flowed through me, it ended up at that length.
Awesome.
Is because that's the size that people have the...
And I'll now look at Sijbe, your business partner here in the Netherlands. Is this on bol.com? And also on Ubidoo? You know ubidoo.com? Oh, I'll check it out. Ubidoo is like it's the same price as bol.com, but they give money to charities. So all their profit they give to charities. So maybe cool. I'm now promoting a platform where they can't buy your book. I'll check it out in a moment.
Or maybe you're inspiring us to have it there also.
Yeah, and also go to bol.com. All the Dutch, it's like the Dutch Amazon. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Not the Amazon of your story.
That's right, different Amazon.
Different Amazon. Okay, but there are like 5 books here, and we've like only 10 more minutes. So I'm gonna ask. Oh, the entire scenery is
we've destroyed the stack.
The decor, the stack of books. Yeah, this book, the Big 5 for Life. You also like how you say that? Created the Big 5 for Life method.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? I'm for the YouTube viewers. I'm now holding up the book, the Big 5 for Life.
And for those listening, we're still holding the book, but you just can't see it because we're listening. Yeah. And so the essence of it, as I said, started with these questions. So let me share it in the form of a story, and then I'll give you a tiny bit more than that. The story is, imagine if every moment of your life was recorded. Everything you did, everything you said, the places that you went, all the ways in which you spent your time. And then towards the end of your life, a museum was built to honor you. Only the museum would show your life exactly how you lived it. And so if 80% of your time was spent at a job that you didn't like or on activities that didn't bring you joy, then 80% of your museum would be dedicated towards that. And there would be pictures, and there would be kiosks, and there would be videos, all showing you spending your time on these things you didn't enjoy. If you love spending time with your family or pursuing your passion or hobby, doing podcasting like this, but for whatever reason, you only spent 2% of your life on these loves, then only 2% of your museum would be dedicated towards that. And imagine what it would be like to walk your museum. What would you see? How would you feel? And now imagine if heaven or the afterlife or however you perceive after this physical experience works, that actually consists of you being the tour guide for your own museum for all of eternity. And it was from this concept, this Museum Day concept, which is part of the Big 5 for Life book, that really captures people's attention. Because the next step is, okay, so what would it look like if I actually had an amazing museum? And this is where this concept of the big 5 for life came in. What are the 5 things that you most want to do, see, or experience in your lifetime before you die? So that if you got to the end, you could look back and you could say, you know what? No matter what else I got to those things, which are the most important ones to me.
Wow.
And maybe that's spending time with your family. Maybe that is doing this podcast, whatever. Everybody's is different, right? So what happened is people would read the book. They'd be like, John, I love that museum day concept. I love the big 5 for life concept. Can you help me figure out my big 5 for life? And that's the answer initially was no. But I got so many requests. And again, it actually started right here in the Netherlands. I got so many requests that I sat down and I wrote for 30 days questions. And I created the course, which is the Big 5 for Life Discovery Experience. And I've had the great, unbelievable, inspiring pleasure of watching thousands of people walk in with a state of uncertainty and walk out knowing exactly what they have on their Big 5 for Life list. Yeah, it's so cool. It honestly is one of the, you were talking about getting a rush on stage. So I don't teach the courses anymore because I wanted to overcome the language barrier. I knew if I was just teaching in English, there was a limit. And so, yes, my business partner is here. And so he runs the Big 5 for Life Netherlands, which is where all the courses are taught out of. And every once in a while, which I actually get to do tonight, I get to step back into the classroom and be a part of it with the students. And just like you were describing on the stage, there is no rush like standing with a group of people and having watched them go from uncertainty to being so passionate about what they do. I mean, I see it in you, Tice. I see in our interactions from the moment I walked in the door. I see it on your website. You are doing what you were destined to do. I mean, you could not fake it and see the smile that I see in your imagery. Yeah. Like I've only known you for an hour, but literally in 60 seconds looking at the website, and everybody should look at Tice's website. If you're thinking about doing something and you're like, I want to be well represented on the web. I want to have something when the world looks at me, they say, this is what they were supposed to do with their life. You should look at Tice's website because you can't look at it and not be like, that's what this dude was destined to do. And that is what I love about the Big 5 for Life courses, because it's that moment when the course is done and I'm looking around that room and I see all of these people that now know for certain this is what I was destined to do.
Well, first of all, thank you for these kind words.
Yeah, no, totally. Totally. Thank you for doing it, because this is, to me, when people say it's, we were talking about where do you categorize yourself? Is it self-development? Is it business? I'm asked that question all the time myself too. I don't know. I just want to do my best to make a positive difference in the lives of others. But the more we collaborate on these things, that's when the game gets super fun. It's like putting 2 people on the field to play the game instead of just yourself. 1 + 1 is better than 2.
Yeah. And I think part of your zone of genius is to put, how do you say, like inspirational stuff in such a visual way with the right questions. For example, the museum.
Thank you.
That's awesome. So I know listeners and viewers on YouTube are now like, if there was a museum of my life so far until this day, how would it look like? And if the museum was like a realistic representation of all the areas I have focused more and less on, how many % of the museum would be like my health or my hobby or my family or whatever?
Yeah.
That's I like that.
Thank you.
It's visual immediately.
We actually had, so I worked with a movie producer to create a cool little video about that. So if you want, we'll send it to you. You can put it in show notes if you want, for people that are very visual in that regard. Yeah. So, because I think the neat thing, the big takeaway from that, as it relates to the Big 5 for Life, as it relates to allowing your life to go in the direction you want to go, is at the end of the day, it's up to you.
Yeah, and let's jump to another book, because you wrote like, I think 6. We have 5 here, but you wrote 6 books.
I think here in the Netherlands, I'm not sure how many are out here in the Netherlands. I've written 10 total. 5
you've
are out
written
here in
10 total.
Yeah.
There are 5. Wow, talking about being productive. Let's jump to your book, How to Be Rich and Happy. Yeah. I have only one question about that book.
Yeah,
how to be rich and happy.
Right. So interestingly, I had the idea for this book. And I co-authored it with another gentleman. And the idea was that when people would be like, John, what are you working on next? And I was like, kind of just tongue in cheek. I was like, I'm working on a book on how to be rich and happy. And they're all like, that's the book I need. But what's weird about it is that So I wrote the book, and it's a different format. The How to Be Rich and Happy book is nonfiction, where the other books are very much stories wrapped in reality.
Yeah, so you're not like, I'm the guru and do these 5 steps.
No. That's not at all the way that I typically write. And How to Be Rich and Happy isn't quite like that either. There's a ton of stories in there, but it is more nonfiction. Yeah. Every chapter is a different concept, right? But anyway, so I was like, this is going to be awesome because everybody has said that's the book I need.
Yeah.
So we released it into the world. And what I discovered instead is that people are like afraid to pick it up. And like if it's in a bookstore, they're like looking around like, who's watching me? Because I'd feel more comfortable picking up porn than I would a book on how to be rich and happy. It's this weird human psychology thing where we're not allowing ourselves to explore what that would look like if I was actually rich and happy. And I think it's because everybody is afraid of how will the world perceive me. So let me clarify right from the start. The definition of rich and happy has nothing to do with money. It's the definition of rich and happy is the ability to do what you want, when you want, in the ways that you want. And backpacking around the world costs less than 40 euro per day to go see the world. This does not require an immense amount of capital. And I've never met a person yet. Actually, this is one of the things we talk about in the Big Fire for Life Discovery course is if I gave you 5 million euro, what would you do?
Yeah.
And then one of the very first things we do after everybody has completed the entire exercise is we demonstrate ways you can do whatever that thing is with zero money. And so this is a big takeaway.
Again, a great question. What would you do with $5 million? And then the question, can't you do those things already?
Yeah. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. And this is very related to the question of rich and happy is the ability to do what you want, when you want, how you want. And so one person said, I would open up a dog shelter. I would rescue strays. I would open up a dog shelter. Awesome, right? Love that idea. And so we asked in the course of the conversation, so what are you going to do Monday? Well, I don't have 5 million euro. Okay, but what could you do with no money? And then, as you said, you start to ask these questions. Well, I guess I could adopt a dog. Well, maybe you don't want to adopt an entire dog. What else could you do? Maybe I could work at a shelter. I could volunteer for 2 hours a week at a shelter and I could just walk stray dogs. Awesome. That requires zero capital, simply an investment of your time. But wait, you're not investing your time. You're actually using your time in a way that you're logging spectacular minutes of your life because you're saying, I want to spend more time with dogs. Yeah. So this is the cool stuff to me. This is where you challenge yourself to say, in what ways can I spend the new currency, the currency that really matters, which is minutes, in a way that fills my life. I
would like to add to this, forget passive income. That's cool, but a lot of people are, you're like nodding yes. A lot of people are like, I want passive income. Well, first of all, that's impossible. Passive, not even Richard Branson has passive income. You have to do stuff. But second of all, let's say you will achieve that. Then what are you gonna do? Well, then I'm gonna do stuff that really makes me happy. So that's wow.
Yeah, that's a very circuitous path to the wait. Why don't you just do stuff that makes you happy in the first place?
Exactly. So and I think the real goal is what you just said. Like, can you do the stuff what you want, when you want, and how you want? If you can like check those 3 boxes, that is the goal.
And so let me, because this idea of passive income often comes up as it relates to people when they're going through the course and so it's a 2-day experience. And basically everybody who goes through, I say they already know what their big 5 for life are. Our job during the course of the 2 days is to help them uncover the layers of, you can't do this, Tice, you shouldn't do this, Tice, all these things people have laid on you over the years. But I firmly believe that everybody actually already knows what's inside there. And so our job is to, through these questions, help peel back those layers. And very often in the early stages, you see this for people like, I just need more money. If I had more money, that would solve everything. And if it was passive, that'd be even better, right? And I do talk in How to Be Rich and Happy. To me, nirvana, when you're doing what you love, is what I call zone 3X. That's when you have a great job, you're doing something that you love, and you make money while you sleep. And so an example of that would be, if you created a cool podcast and someone downloads it, like, maybe you personally are making money while you sleep. I'm not there at the cash register ringing up every single book that somebody buys around the world. But the point is that if you start with the passion and you start with what would fill my minutes with spectacular museum day moments, and then you say, And who is an example of doing that in a way that I admire, that I love, that I can get excited about, and there's a passive element to it? That is the path to victory. If you do it the reverse way, it's the path to tragedy.
Yeah. Once again, a quote by John Strelecky. I like that.
And trust me, all these things that I say because I have done it wrong and I have experienced it and lived to realize that there was a much better way. Yeah. I am not judging anybody. I have failed on so many levels with all of these, only to come to these realizations.
And what I like big time is what you mentioned like a few minutes ago, that all the answers are within you. Yeah. It's like the question of all the questions that people say, but I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what I want. And then it's such a geruststelling, shit, how do you say it in English? comforting thing to know, that relax, breathe, all the answers are, the only thing you need to do is peel the layers off. Yeah. But you already know what your big five for life is. All the answers are within you. That's, I can't like,
so then it comes down, then it comes down to this technique that we've been talking about. So there's probably a couple of phases of this. So let's be very tactical here for everybody who's listening, very practical in the process.
Yeah.
Step one, do you honestly feel that you're worthy of knowing? That can be a huge one.
Yeah.
If you don't believe that your life is worth living in a positive way, you will never allow it to be peeled back. But if you can get comfortable with this, and I hope you have in some way, shape, or form through Tice's and I conversation today, that everybody has genius, right? Everybody who's listening on this call has genius, so let it out. So if you believe, yes, I can allow my genius to come out, then the question is, all right, so what is the process for that? We talked about finding your who's instead of suffering from how disease. Yeah. All right, well, my path was I went and backpacked around the world for a year. If that connects to you on a deep, energetic level when you hear it, fantastic, right? If it's walking in the woods without your phone on for an hour a day and recording in your journal, what did you discover during that hour? Maybe that's your path. If it's hiring a coach, you talked about, you decided to podcast and I'm going to throw this out there, so correct me if I'm wrong. My guess is that you said, all right, I can either figure this all out on my own, or I can accelerate my progress by getting a good coach who can teach me how to go from point A to point Z in about 30 days, including these are the microphones to use, here's how to do it, here's good interview questions, and I can accelerate my progress. Am I accurate at that?
It wasn't one guy or one girl, but on several levels, I found my coaches and adopted the strategies. Yeah,
fantastic. So a series of coaches. This to me was one of the areas where I struggled so much in my life because I was ashamed that I didn't know the answers. And I was afraid to ask someone because I knew that in asking them, I had to admit that I didn't know the answers. And I had such a low degree of self-confidence at different points in my life because I was poor and I was embarrassed because I was poor. And so I could not bring myself to admit to other people, I don't know the answer. Let me tell you, everybody who is listening, this will hold you back forever. If you have to figure everything out on your own, it's just going to take you so long. I mean, allow yourself to get comfortable with the fact that you don't know everything. I can firmly say at this point in my life, I know next to nothing. As much as I have learned along the way, I still know next to nothing. And therefore, when I meet someone who can accelerate my progress on that path, that is one of the best investments of my time, my energy, my money, because life is limited. It's 28,900 days. Yeah. And I cannot stress that enough, that this took me forever to get comfortable with, but it's been one of the best learnings I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. Yeah, I think spending money on self-development is one of the best things you can spend your money on, and maybe even a coach, someone who can help you.
Yeah, and so if your thing is, again, if your thing is podcasting, get a great coach who can teach you how to do this well. If you want to be an expert at starting a bakery, invest in the relationship with people who run bakeries and learn from them and reward them for their expertise.
Yeah.
And you will grow at light speed.
Okay, let's wrap this up.
All right.
I'm going to ask you a question and I think I know the answer.
Sorry, can I close one final thought of that?
Yeah, totally. Which
is the biggest barrier to investing in ourselves, by the way, is that we don't think we're worth it. Get over that.
Yeah.
You're totally worth it. And you're going to let your genius shine through. And that's when the game really gets fun. All right, sorry.
Yeah. I think I know the answer, but what is your definition of success? Being successful.
So I will couch it in the context of my personal PFE, my purpose for existing. And my purpose is to create museum day moments for myself and for others.
Awesome.
And that is success. I used to think it was just about being joyful. And I came to realize that there are moments in my life that are not necessarily joyful moments. My dad has Parkinson's. He's 78 years old, and he's slipping a lot now. I don't know how many more months or hopefully years, but I don't know if it'll be that long that I have left with him. And when I sit with him on the dock, because he loves to fish, and when I sit with him on the dock, he often falls asleep now. The conversation doesn't flow like it used to because of his disease. This is not a particularly joyful experience. And like, hey, well, that's awesome, super good, right? But it's a museum day moment that I treasure. I treasure every one of those minutes. And so the aha moment for me was that it is about creating these museum day moments for myself and for others. And that is what success means to me.
Awesome. So for everyone listening or viewing, it's like finding what do you want from life? And that is your definition of success, right?
Filling your days, filling your minutes of your day with things that you think that was a great minute. That was well spent.
Cool. Okay, let's end with some cool opposites. You have to choose between two things. And for the viewers and listeners, stick with us because we're gonna introduce like a great win deal. I don't know what the English word is. Where
a giveaway.
A giveaway, yeah. Nice. We're gonna do a great giveaway.
Prizes, everybody stick around for the prizes.
Yeah, stick around for the prizes, and you will
I'll sign the books,
it. Yeah. You will sign the books and stuff. So it will be very cool. Okay, a few annoying opposites, and you have to choose one of them.
All right. Do I talk about this, or I just give the one-word answer?
Yeah, just the one-word answer. All right, here we go. From the connection with your intuition.
All right. Yeah. Difficult for me, as you can tell, because I talk a lot.
Okay, John, here we go. All right. Day or night?
Night.
Driver or passenger?
Driver.
Green smoothie or English breakfast?
Green smoothie. 1,000 times over green smoothie.
Okay. Let's get that clear. Nothing wrong with British people, but their breakfast. Okay, naked or pajamas?
Naked.
Going out camping or staying all-inclusive?
Camping.
Classical music or death metal?
Classical.
No more music or no more sex?
Ooh. No more music.
The Maldives or Iceland?
I haven't been to either one. I'm going to go Maldives on this.
Maldives, yeah. Cooking at home or going out for dinner?
Going out for dinner.
Taking risks or playing it safe?
Taking risks.
Money makes you happy or money makes you unhappy?
Money makes me happy.
Richard Branson or Steve Jobs?
Branson.
Book or podcast?
Both.
That's very clever of you. Justin Bieber or Justin Timberlake?
Justin Timberlake.
Focus on the future or focus on the here and now?
Focus on the here and now.
Enjoying the process or enjoying achieving the goal?
Oh gosh, man, you're throwing out these tough ones. All right, enjoying the process.
Live one day as a king or live one day as a child again?
Oh, child.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was awesome. That's a great, wow, those are tough ones, man.
Yeah, they are. I know, yeah. They were designed to be tough.
What does this tell me about myself, Tice? I don't know.
Yeah. You said so many inspiring things, but this last 2 minutes, that was like, wow.
I need to be naked while drinking a green smoothie, listening to classical music, I think is what I took away from that. Yeah. While camping, I think.
While camping, yeah. As a child.
As a child.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I think people should go to thijslindhout.nl/... John, is that a fun word or /y? Maybe that's more cool.
I don't know. The website they should go to is at big5forlife.nl is the place for me here in the Netherlands. Is that the question?
Oh, no. We're going to do like for this giveaway.
Oh, for the giveaway. Yeah. Okay.
And I talked with Sijbe about this in a short.
Then you know more than I do.
Yeah, totally. But we can improvise the URL. So thijslindhout.nl, thijslindhout.nl/ let's do Y. I like that.
Okay. Fantastic. WHY.
WHY. Yeah. And it'll be in the description of the podcast as well. And people can win. We have like 10 books here. So I think we can give away at least, I don't know, all of them. Or a few. Let's say 10 books. And you will sign them. And I will share. This is an AVG we have like this law in the Netherlands that we have to say we use your email address. So we will, you will be on my mailing list and the mailing list of the Big Five for Life, and you can unsubscribe at
anytime you want.
Anytime you want. So go to thijslindhout.nl/why for one of the 10 signed books, and we have all of your books. So
nice. So is it random? This would be like,
I think it's random.
Random emails will be selected.
10 random emails, and you will win a random book. Well, a genius book, but it's random. So the universe will decide. Oh, and we can we will give everyone a free ebook. Maybe even multiple ebooks. So if you're one of those guys or girls who thinks, I don't win anything, just go to thijslindhout.nl/why and you will get free ebooks immediately. Go. And within a few weeks, you'll know if you're one of the lucky winners. I think
that one is the 10 tips for living the life of your dreams, which in part covers a little bit about the Big Five for Life, which we've talked about. So they'll get a little bit more information even than they got today.
Awesome. Awesome. So finally, John, is there something I should have asked you but didn't ask you?
Gosh, we've covered so much territory. I love the conversation, first of all. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for doing what you do, because as I said, I think each of us has our respective genius, and I can clearly tell that you are in the sweet spot of what you do, and I love that. I love being in that energy. And I guess a final takeaway, we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of good topics. Hope we get to do this again. So maybe we'll throw this out to the listeners that if we didn't cover something that you are curious about, totally. Submit it to Thijs and I'll come back or we'll do it remotely and we'll cover whatever stuff we haven't talked about. But my last takeaway would simply be that I am 50 this year, and this has been a turning point for me. We were talking about the highs and the lows, actually, when we were in the kitchen before we started on our call, and that life accelerates. And if you've ever gone on vacation for a week and then you start on Monday and you're like, oh, got all week. This is going to be awesome, right? Tuesday, you're like, so great, man. I got all week on vacation. And then like Thursday, all of a sudden you're like, what? It's Thursday already? Like, this is almost over, right? That life is the same, I've discovered, that it speeds up. And so my final takeaway thought in conjunction with things we've talked about, I don't think it's something different than we've talked about, is that the time is now. And that allow yourself to discover your genius and allow that genius to be part of your everyday life in the way that you spend your minutes, and do it now as opposed to waiting, because time speeds up as you get older and the time is now.
Oh, awesome. And you just inspired me to add to the a giveaway that there will be a field where you can type stuff.
Okay.
And you can type what question do you want to have answered? Because I feel we're going to do a version 2.
Nice.
Maybe in Florida, maybe in Europe, maybe via Skype.
There you go.
So people can maybe say, okay, you discussed this subject, but I have this question about it. Sure. Or you triggered this question. So on thijslindhout.nl/why you can also leave a question and we will handle that in the next podcast.
Love to do that.
Life is now is like the big takeaway at the end.
Fantastic. Thank you again for having me here. Loved it.
Thank you so much, Bucks.
100% Thijs.
Thanks voor het luisteren naar deze episode in the English. En John, jij bedankt voor je tijd. Tof dat je bij je Europa Tour eventjes langs Amersfoort kwam om een bezoekje te brengen aan de 100% Inspiratie podcast. Wil je een van die boeken winnen als luisteraar? Check dan gewoon heel erg snel thijslindhout.nl/why. W-H-Y, dus W-H-Y. Why, waarom? Gewoon why, je snapt het wel. Want daar krijg je gratis een pdf met 10 tips voor meer geluk in je leven van John. En kun je dus een van die boeken winnen. Nou, en als je dan toch op thijslindhout.nl bent, of volgens mij zelfs nadat je hebt aangemeld voor de winactie, word je ook uitgenodigd voor de 100% Inspiratieshow. Dus ja, bestel dan gewoon even je ticket als je dat nog niet hebt gedaan. En dan zien we elkaar daar en kunnen we daar verder praten. Thanks voor het luisteren. Tot volgende week en leef intens.